When a complex system is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos have the capacity to shift the entire system to a higher order. What does that mean to you?
I do think that at a systemic level, we are out of balance in our connection with the earth, our connection with each other, often our connection with ourselves. So when we say that person has more power, what we mean is they have more access to control or more access to systems of control. To me, that's not power. What I'm hoping for is to detangle what I would call systems of control and limiting access.
If there's somebody listening today that feels like they are oppressed by the systems of control that have the perceived power, what would you say to them?
I would say both are true. Nelson Mandela can experience liberation in a cell. That doesn't mean that everybody should be forced to do that. We should also work on whatever is fucked up with these systems of access and control.
Feminine leadership versus female leadership.
When there was that whole wave of people wearing like the future is female, and then people shifted to the future is feminine, and I'm like, no, neither one.
Yeah.
The future is all of us, and the future is wholeness. The power that men have to be the one that holds the boundary, to have a sense of what creates the most life, love, freedom for everyone, and then to hold the boundary there, even if someone else is saying they want to go farther, sort of like, oh no, we're going to stay here. Like, again, whether it's sort of sexually or business-wise.
That just feels so good
Doesn't
to
it
hear.
feel so
Everything in me is like, yes.
Moving at the speed of trust.
Oh, that's good.
There are times when the speed of trust is like, oh yeah, I trust enough to slow down. And then other times that it's like, oh, I trust enough I can take that action.
As a woman, to embody your pleasure, live your purpose, and know your power is a revolutionary act. I'm here for the revolution. These are your words, obviously. You're like, damn, that's good. Who said that? Like, it's you. You said it.
Women's embodied pleasure is feared and demonized. However, are we going to deny ourselves the experience of our own pleasure just because somebody might misuse it? And in some way, that's our power too, is to know, like, this is too big, too powerful, too pure for you to corrupt. Your gaze doesn't corrupt this.
Kendra, welcome to the whole shebang.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
It is an honor to be hosting this conversation today. I've spent some time since we chatted, and I've been looking over your work, some of your work, what I can see of it, and was like, if you would have asked me a year ago what we would be talking about, I think it's different than what I think we're going to talk about today. And so what I want to start with is one of the quotes that you had up on your Instagram. And it says, when a complex system is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos have the capacity to shift the entire system to a higher order. What does that mean to you?
Well, I did have somebody reflect that they had read that actually in the scientific and that it changed their understanding. And I was like, oh, I should go check that out. I have not done that yet. So
Okay.
I still think it's relevant, even if I'm wrong scientifically. That's what I'm going to say. I still think it's relevant. For me, I'll go out on a limb here, I guess, and I'll just say I do think that at a systemic level, we are out of balance. Just in our connection with the earth, to some extent, our connection with each other, often our connection with ourselves. So I think that's what it says when a complex system is out of balance. And so I don't think that we need to look at that catastrophically, but just to kind of go like, oh yeah, actually this does actually feel out of balance. To me, it was soothing to feel as though not everything had to change, but that actually it was important. And I think there is a way even to look at this like our body is a complex system, and that we can find coherence in our own body. But to me, it really was also specifically, like, I think there's so much out there that's about kind of regulating yourself or soothing yourself or figuring out how to manage your life on your own, or, and so there was something about these small islands of coherence that's just been really, it's like, oh, where do we come together and find coherence? I would also, like, to me, that's really different than agreement. I mean, I don't know about really different. It might have to be dramatically, and it could include agreement, but I think of it as resonance. Also, the way that, a tuning fork will resonate with, and that it both was soothing to me in the sense of it, of the simplicity of it, but also reminded me of the power that I have both to connect in coherence with people around me as these small islands of coherence. I love they said small, right? Because it's like it could be small. Um, but also, if I imagine that there's vibration in the world, right? Like social media sort of vibrates at a certain level,
Yeah.
speed at least, right? There's a speeder, and then right, we to some extent habitually probably resonate with the vibration around us, but we can also choose. Oh, what if I am the vibration at which others around me can attune to? And so maybe what is the pace of that, or the speed, or the energy of it? And
Yeah.
again, it's distinct from like just stay high vibe, but like, no, what is it that I want resonating? What do I want to choose to resonate with? What do I want to be that others can resonate with? Yeah.
Okay, there's so much there. So when you were writing that, when you were posting that, and you talk about, if there's a lack of resonance or a lack of coherence, was there what were you speaking to? Is it what you're seeing in social media? I'm just going to like call out, is it the
Yeah.
political stuff happening, or was it just something more personal? Are you looking at the bigger scope of things right now when you posted that, or what was that about for you?
Yeah, I mean, in one sense, it was very much about what's happening politically in the United States. And
Yeah.
like, I think they use the words first, just a complex system out of balance.
Yeah.
But then they talk about chaos. And
Yeah.
I think there is a sense whether it actually is chaos or not, the sense that I have is that a lot of people around me feel chaotic or feel chaos energy. And so that was the space in which that landed in my world, and it was kind of sort of the space at which it brought some. I mean, I would say even reading that, it was like it brought some coherence to my system. And in this, I mean, this is different than the quote itself, but just that idea of action being the antidote to hopelessness or despair. Like it gave me a gesture that felt really like, oh, yes, I know what to do. I know what to do with this. Whereas I had found myself a little bit in a like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do?
Yeah.
Which I would also say is notable for me because people do come to me a lot and they're like, yeah, but what do I do about that?
And
And
you're like, you
often my
just
response
be.
is sort of like, yeah, maybe it's not so much like, what do we do coming
Yeah.
from this? How do I fix or solve or change, but that was very much what was coming up for me a lot. But what do I do? What do I do? And so to find some gesture that felt true and manageable and effective in some way, like it does actually have an impact, was really important to me.
And so for lack of a better way of putting it, the doing or the action to take would be finding that resonance within self or becoming the tuning fork. Is that kind of what was the thing for you that was like, okay, this is who I'm being?
I would say that actually the first thing for me, because that can be, right? It can
Yeah.
be an inward piece first. I think that is great. It can totally work. For me, it was actually important to make an outward gesture. And one of the first things I did was reach out to a friend and I left a message and I basically said, like, I'm not okay. And so it was kind of I mean, there's content to that. Like it was important that the content, but it was also just a truth telling. It was reaching out to somebody that I do feel fundamental resonance with. Although I also like to say he's one of my favorite people to disagree with. And I think it's because of that fundamental resonance that we've known each other almost 20 years now or something.
Yeah.
And we, we've had points of disagreement and just to be able to go like, oh, I'm not okay. Actually, I need connection here. And I need this feeling of coherence.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can also be, right, even if we don't agree about everything, like when it seems really chaotic, somebody who will say, oh, I don't think you're crazy. Like, I see what you see. Which isn't, again, total agreement. We may not agree about what to do or every little piece, but it's like, yes, I see what you see. It's like, oh, thank God.
There's so much, I'm watching what you're sharing online, and a lot of women that I think are in the same circle that I've been in. And you just correct any of this if I'm misspeaking at all, but in the realm of feminine embodiment and polarity and creating health and wholeness and wellness within, and then within community and connection to the earth, and with everything that's happening, I'm personally, I don't know if the word is struggling or wrestling with, like, I'm hesitating to not say what to do, but the role to play. Like I feel called, and I would love to talk about the leadership component with you. I feel sort of compelled to try to find some way to bring a base of unity to the conversation, because I think that if we can recognize that we all have the same life force flowing through us, that we're not we shouldn't be in a, if there's oneness, pitted against each other. But then on the other hand, I'm thinking of this life death life cycle, and how there's destruction before there's rebirth. And do I actually need to be involved in repairing something? What if things are meant to just deconstruct? And my best gift to that is to hospice it. So I've been curious about, like, how your vantage point on what's happening, and how you're relating to it, what's happening politically specifically and societally, and how we relate to that right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big question. And
Yeah.
I definitely acknowledge that different people have different roles. And I think there's an inhale, exhale. I mean, I love that you brought in kind of the life death life cycle, but I think looking at cycles is actually important. Some of that includes looking at history, right? Some people
Yeah.
like to talk about cycles in the more cosmic sense, but they don't actually go like, yeah, and historically, what is so there's many layers of cycle. And then inhale, exhale is also looking at things from content, but also at kind of energetic signature. So the impulse to be constantly engaged in social justice, it has often a very similar energetic signature as the impulse to be constantly producing for capitalism.
Ooh, break that down. Can you break that down?
Like,
What's
oh my God, I
similar?
have to, like, I haven't done enough. I don't know enough. I haven't donated enough money. I'm not politically involved. I'm like, what? I didn't do anything a minute ago. Like that, just the impulse that goes like, oh my God, I haven't done enough. I haven't done enough. I haven't done enough. I haven't done enough. Like, you can feel, it's like the train that goes like chugga chugga chugga, like,
Yeah.
I haven't made enough money. I haven't posted enough. I haven't, it feels like the same energetic signature. And I think that we I want to be aware of both, because there's an inclination also to go very all or nothing. Well, then great, then it's all about just like, I need to find my own inner peace so that I'm unplugging from that signature, right? And actually the most important thing I can do is like, self-liberation, and I just want to say I don't think it's either or. And that when we think it's either or, we also miss the point. And that has its own energetic signature. So something that goes like, oh, right, yes, I want to be really aware of when I'm running the same operating system, but for a different cause. Like I could run that operating system for money, or I could run it for social justice.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same operating system, but that rather than going like, I guess that means I need to opt out altogether, I go like, so how am I going to do this differently? How do I recognize there is something that I can do and I can't do everything? And that there's a time to the, depending on who we are and I don't know, this is a weird example, but my son is 15 and I mean, didn't we all just know everything when we were, you're just
Yes.
right about everything.
Yeah.
So he kind of likes to poke at me, but I like it. And something that is true for me, or one of the ways that I sort of don't engage with a system based on my values is like, I do not shop from Amazon. Um, and I never get more like criticism than when I post about that publicly.
Really?
Oh yeah.
I
I mean,
just
I think it's
started
becoming
talking
a
about
little
this.
bit
I'm
more
like,
of
I
a,
better expect it's coming for me too. But yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
most people are just like, well, not everybody can do that. And like some people they're posting like for other people. They're like, not everybody has that luxury, or that's such a privileged standpoint, or
Hmm.
some people have chronic illnesses and I'm like, well, first of all, I'm not talking about being puritanical about it. I still order things online.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't live in a hut, like I'm not whittling my own spoons. I know people who do and also buy things on, but like I'm not actually. So I'm not trying to say I'm perfect.
Yeah.
But I do talk about it publicly. And what my son was kind of poking was he was like, oh yeah, well, that's kind of virtue signaling. And I said, well, actually, I think I would like to think of it more like possibility modeling, is that I want people to know that it's actually possible. Because I think sometimes it really seems like I can't survive without this. Like it's so now ingrained, or that we get caught in a thing of I can't do without this thing. And I like to say, like, actually it's possible. And I still do order things online. And maybe it takes longer. Maybe I have to buy a slightly different thing. Maybe I have to like research the thing and find out. You can buy everything you can buy on Amazon somewhere else.
Yes. Yeah.
And then maybe there are some people that live some places where they find that there's like 5 things they actually need to buy on Amazon, really different than like 100 things. So again, I'm not going all or nothing. But part of what I said to my son was also like, I I do have a following. It's not huge. I'm not like a star, but and he kind of had this like, oh yeah, you're right. You're actually one of those people that could make a difference by saying something. So I think recognizing what power we do have. Do we have it by saying something locally? Do we have a bit of a platform where it's actually relevant, not as like a preacher style? Oh, and preachers are great too. It's not my style, but like where we can say something that can make people think.
Yeah.
Do we have the time to donate to a cause? And then where do we step back into maybe our personal selves, our family life, our exhale? And so letting it have some rhythm and not making it all one or the other.
Yeah, for people that aren't watching this on YouTube, I'm really loving your body language and just that inhale, exhale sense of rhythm. And that theme has been coming up a lot. I mean, the natural cycles that we go through, I'm going to say versus, which is kind of ironic, this binary way of thinking, that this or that. And in the polarity world, I'm seeing a lot more people talk about that, which I'm loving because it's been a real like, can I say it? Can I swear? I guess it's
your
my
podcast.
It's been like I'm asking, can you give me permission? Like mindfuckery, to be like, feel like, oh, I've got to move into this thing and sold an idea that I've got to move into this thing to get that thing. Or if I do this, it's going to get that. And really what it feels like to be, and you've used the phrase radically whole. Like, what does it look like to be radically whole? And then inhale and exhale through the two poles of any topic, of anything, of so I really appreciate that in your work that you're putting out there, you're bringing the nuance of that to the forefront, because that feels liberating to me. That feels more like freedom and more real than
Yeah.
trying to fit into something.
And even in that kind of a realm, like if we want to talk about the polarity realm for a hot second,
I
at
sense a
least,
feeling around that,
yeah.
Kendra, which I'd like to hear. Yeah.
Well, at least acknowledging that if we're choosing to play on the farther ends of the poles, that it's a choice on purpose for a reason, usually for a period of time, or it's a recognition. I mean, one of the ways I like to invite people, and not just kind of in polarity, masculine, feminine, but in the realm of what I would call range, like range of expression, is saying like, yeah, I'm going to invite you into things that might, quote, not feel like you, or I'm just not that. In order to know if we even have access to that part. So it can be helpful sometimes for simplification's sake, I mean, basketball players, I mean, they'll literally just dribble for a whole thing, and then they'll practice just shooting, 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 but no game is any one thing.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we'll say, hey, let's just practice this intensively so that it comes more naturally, so I have more access to this realm of my being. And then we're going to put it into play in a way that's way, way, way more nuanced.
That's so good and freeing. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're welcome. I'm so glad.
I know. I'm like, yeah, it's been a thing. And it's interesting because I'm stepping into relaunching a different business that has nothing to do with polarity, or relaunching, I should say. And I feel myself moving into a different part of my range. And I've been so much in, I'm just going to say the more feminine side for many, many months as a practice sort of devotion maybe. And I feel myself moving into a more whole, I would say a more whole balance of that. And it feels really fucking good. It just feels good to have that structure and to have this, a different kind of power. It feels like a different kind of power. Which I didn't intend that to be a lead in, but I think I would love to talk with you about power. I've seen you talking about that recently, and I think it's relevant depending on what framework we want to take with it. But you laid out some of the lies around power. If you would just speak to what is power and what are the lies and the truths around it.
I'm like, oh, I wish I could remember what I wrote.
I wrote it down. I can walk you through
Okay,
them.
you can jog me. I mean, I would
Yeah.
say in the largest sense, one of the things that I really want, I mean, if what I'm hoping for is to detangle what I would call systems of control and limiting access. Like, well, that's what we call power. When we say that person has more power, what we mean is they have more access to control, or they have more access to systems of control. When we talk about power imbalances, that's often what we're talking about. Oh, like they can say whether I have access to something or not. To me, that's not power. That's but it's so mapped over now. That's just the way we talk about it. And so again, I love to bring this more into like the actual practice realm. But one of the things I often will say to people or have people practice with is the power of. Because most people have the experience of like, oh, that was like such a powerful song, or like, oh wow, I was so deeply impacted. And people won't necessarily say it was a powerful sunset, but they'll be like the power of a sunset, right, to stop you in your tracks,
Yeah.
or the power of the moon, or the power of the wind. And when you look at it that way, you go like, oh, this power itself, right, is this thread that runs through maybe everything, but it definitely runs through like many, many things. And it has something to do with the impact on us. But things can impact us differently and they can all be powerful, right? But that sense, like if something takes your breath away, or if it makes you laugh out loud, or if it, right, that's like an impact. So I really want to just continue to detangle this idea that power is this thing that is more like control and access to systems of, I don't even know what to call them, but
I think we know what you mean when you say that. So one of the truths that you said, or maybe you can state the lie, but is that we all have that power, or we all have access to power. I don't know how you'd phrase that, but how do we? I mean, I'll just speak to myself. When I think of the power that I feel, to me, it's like love with a capital L. It's this inner, it's from within, and that can take on different feelings, emotions, textures, range, to me, and I can feel well, like even what I was just saying, this energy that I'm moving into now with my business feels like a different kind of power, but they're all power to me, and they're power from within. If there's somebody listening today that feels like they are oppressed by the systems of a control that have the perceived power, what would you say to them?
I would say both are true. So one of the reasons that I really want to distinguish this is because I think then again, people fall into these binaries, and either there's sort of this idea like everybody has the same power all the time. And I think that's true, but it dismisses that actually there are systems and limits and to access to these systems, and there are systems of control. So to me, the fact that like Nelson Mandela can like experience liberation in a cell, great. That doesn't mean that everybody should be forced to do that in order, we should also work on whatever is fucked up with these systems of access and control. And to acknowledge that somebody actually does have added limitations while still acknowledging that they actually hold the same innate power. And then grappling with that, to me, that's much more interesting than either going like everyone can experience liberation or they have more power than the other person, right? Like to me, neither of those is exactly true.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Okay, so lie number 2, power is only masculine. You spoke to this a little bit already, but if you want to address that again.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think this is like opening up a lot more culturally, but I think what I would call the over culture tends to like over reward kind of the pushy power.
Yeah.
And especially in access to systems or in terms of money or things that we do need in this world, right? Again, I always want to say it's both. I want to be like, is money the end all be all? No. Do we need it to live in this world? Yes. Don't tell me money doesn't matter, but don't tell me it's the end all be all. Like neither one is, So I do still think like, especially in the world of money. So when we look at kind of the overculture, when we look at these things that like the kind of structure, the kind of forcefulness, the kind of clarity, these things tend to be more rewarded than, the power of surrender, which is vast and, massively rewarding in our lives. It doesn't get paid for all that often.
How do we do it? How do we get paid for it, Kendra?
Well, I don't know. And I sometimes question, whether everything should get paid or whether this idea that money, like how do we work this out? But acknowledging the value of things. And again, I think that it's this both. To me, it's really this both. It's really acknowledging them publicly, systemically, being willing to talk about them. And then there is this internal work. Like I remember when I had my first child, and I was out to tea with a dear friend who, total feminist, all the things, like awesome woman, and just made an offhanded comment about how it was like so great that my husband was supporting me. And it kind of stuck with me. And it wasn't until a little later I was like, wait, who's supporting who? he only gets to go to work because I sit and nurse our child for hours. Like
Yes.
the hours that I spent in that rocking chair supported him to be able to go out in the world to have people write checks that had his name on them. And so I think we have to acknowledge, we have to do the inner work of knowing our own value and our own power. And also there's public work to be done.
Kendra, you're so great. This is so great. There's so much. There's so much. Feminine leadership versus female leadership. And I think these are really related concepts to me. I'm reflecting a lot right now on what is leadership? I don't know where we want to start with this conversation, but as it relates to having access to our own power, or power in the community, power in our work, power in what we're doing, but then also how we lead in and through that. So can you speak to feminine versus female leadership / power?
Yeah. I mean, again, this is like not even the cliff notes in some sense, because it so much of this, I think, needs to get parsed out in real life and in actual practice. And but to recognize some of those polarities, right, in terms of kind of a point and direct style of leadership, or a, we're going this way, or a, this is the structure and this is the way we're going to do it, or a little bit more linear, holding the flag and marching onward. I mean, and being a little dramatic, but in terms of a certain kind of masculine leadership. I mean, and you can see women that do that, and sometimes that's fantastic.
I feel like it's wartime. There's a book, I'm blanking on the name, Wartime Leadership versus something else. And this kind of, I used to use that example when I was leading the office that I'm in, but I always botched the end of it, like Braveheart. I was like, oh, the guy, like the Braveheart guy, he's at the end and he's got the flag. And one of my good buddies came up to me afterwards, and like I had, not like I'm leading with the flag, but I'd kind of paralleled myself in some weird way to this leader on the movie. And he's like, what happens to him at the end of the movie, right? I was like, what? He's like, he gets beheaded. I'm just like, shoot. But anyways, that it feels like that kind of leadership, it comes in handy for certain scenarios where you need here's what we need, clarity.
And I would say even not wartime, but there's a real, and this is, I mean, I think all good leadership will always weave both. But again, there was a whole, I think I originally wrote that, and I kind of adjusted it as we go, but part of it came through when there was that whole wave of people wearing, like, the future is female. And then people shifted to the future is feminine, and I'm like, no, neither one.
Yeah.
The future is all of us. And the future is wholeness. And wholeness doesn't mean balance. And of course, there's a truth to what they were saying, which is what I was trying to say in that too, which is like we are skewed towards both the masculine and the male. So in one sense, like, do we need a female president just to have a female president? Yes. Like, kind of we do.
Yeah.
We can't, and this is like the whole weird DEI debate is like, no, we shouldn't do that because she's a woman. I mean, in some way we should, just because she's a woman, but also we cannot imagine, like, we can't really, like, in your real brain, we can't think that actually all the men have been more qualified than all the women for this long. That's not possible. That's not possible. And it's the same way. You can't go like all the white people can't have been more qualified than all the black people. That's just not possible. So we're acknowledging that there are these systems that weight something, and it's and again, it's internalized. We see it that way. And so I do think that there is actually an experience of walking through the world in a female body that is underrepresented because there are fewer female bodies talking publicly in certain ways. And that doesn't inherently mean we're going to have more feminine leadership, which is more we-based. And some of that is literally hormonal.
Yeah.
but there is, and even in a small sense, like if I look at me and my team, that there are places to really, get curious and ask questions and want to hear from other people and make sure that we're all included. And then the fact is, it's my business. And it would be like negligent of me to not be like, and this is where we're going. I'd be like, well, where do you think we should go? And that's just not, it's not true.
Yeah.
So for me to be like, well, I just want to lead from my feminine would be kind of negligent in the role that I'm in. Now, there are times when that has real beauty and being more in the evocative side is also beautiful and valuable and creates other possibilities in other moments, and even with clients, so, and I think we see that too, like as a teacher, a guide, or a coach, that it would be negligent for me to be like, well, I just want to go wherever the energy's going. It's kind of like, well, they came to me because I'm going to hold a little structure, but it's also not like, well, I'm going to say what your path is and we're just going to go there,
Right.
because I see more clearly that it's a weave.
It's so good. I feel like one of the things that's been challenging about this conversation for me, and you're touching on it without saying it explicitly, or it feels like you're touching on it to me, is that we have a lot of words that have taken on different meaning and that have become so, what's the word I'm looking for? Polarizing, or just like agitating, including the patriarchy and the future is female, and I'm maybe overly sensitive too, but I don't think so. I'm sensitive to the message that that's sending to the men in our world too, and I also really want the men listening to understand that there is an opportunity for them to step into a kind of leadership that is more whole, that isn't about them leading only from their feminine. It's everything you just said. And I think we really need that right now. And I was like, do I need to talk about this in terms of right brain, left brain, so that the conversation feels more accessible? And coincidentally or not, I just got Martha Beck's latest book called Beyond Anxiety. I was like, I don't think I have anxiety, but I'm going to get it. Turns out I probably do. But her whole framework for the book is around left brain, right brain. And I was like, she's saying it's the same thing. It's the same conversation, but it's feels like, oh, she's approaching it from an angle that might be more accessible for some people that are turned off because of the words that have become so fiery for people.
Yeah. Gosh, yeah. And again, I think it's tricky, and it's beautiful to imagine. For me anyway, I go like, great, so she can talk about that. And then you might read it and you might incorporate things. And then that might be, and then I think there is also a place to keep kind of talking about things, but to keep
Yeah.
expanding them. So, I mean, one of the examples I would give around men, and again, it's more the masculine is what I would say, but for men, but there is a way I do think this plays out for many men, is that culturally I would say we have boundaries wrong. Like boundaries are actually they're masculine. Whoever's holding the boundary, that's a masculine piece that they're holding. But culturally, we've put it that women are the ones who are supposed to like have a boundary somewhere, and men get their value by going as far as they can, whether that's
Wow.
sexually or in business, or like to push as far as we can go is a rewarded trait in men. And so again, this is one of those things that I would love to see, like a global shift in my lifetime. If I have any way of interjecting this in, is like the power that men have to be the one that holds the boundary, actually to have a sense of what creates the most life, love, freedom for everyone, and then to hold the boundary there, even if someone else is saying they want to go farther, sort of like, oh no, we're going to stay here. Like that's what an incredible role, what incredible leadership to actually say, this is where there's the most life. And maybe we can try over here, but then we're going to, if it's not actually more kind of freedom for everyone, then we're going to pull it back to where it is. And to be the one that is feeling into that and then holding something in that way, again, whether it's sort of sexually or like business wise.
Yeah. That just feels so good to
Doesn't it feel
hear.
so good?
Like everything in me is like, yes. I mean, and I'm thinking in terms of leadership right now with business and politically, and just to the thought of men standing up and holding the boundary and feeling into that space, and women can do that too. But if we're speaking to just the topic that you're talking about boundaries versus pushing as far as we can go, to have men that would stand just like strong legs and be like, here's the boundary. Oof.
Yeah.
That feels good.
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of a tangent. We don't have to go there, but because humans sort of have this broader way that we're expressing. But that same quote about coherence, at the same time I saw that quote, I saw a piece that was around how bison would protect the most vulnerable. And my guess is that that was largely like large males on the outside, females, probably maybe like nursing females, and then the young at the very center, or the elders, right? In some configuration. And to me, that was another way of looking at that coherence too, is just, okay, as things are like this, we may not change everything immediately and have it all in harmony. So how do we also orient so that we're actually protecting those that need the most protection?
How do we?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think there's some larger ways to look at that. And then there's also like, okay, well, great. Who in my actual community or my local neighborhood might need more? Or who might know who needs more? And to me, this also does speak a little bit to the leadership, I think, is recognizing our different roles in different circumstances. Like there's a woman in my community who's just a great organizer. And she does this incredibly grassroots organization every holiday season, but she does it in other realms too, where she just she's tapped into who needs to be supported around the holidays, which families are not going to have, presents or a tree or a meal, and she literally puts it out to the community, and she's like, who wants to, it's mutual aid rather than like. And if you have a little more, you're like, great. And then she goes like, okay, they've got a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, and an 8-year-old. These are the things they want. And then this is what the mom needs. And you just go buy it and you give it to the woman who's organizing, like all wrapped up, and then she just makes sure everyone gets it. My role in that is that I often have a little more to get. Like I have some time and I have some money. I don't need to be the leader. I don't need to try to do what she's doing. She does it better than I could do.
I feel like that's speaking to something else that I saw you write, which is that you are working to help people connect to just who they are at their core, to that inner compass that, if as we started this conversation, if people are like, well, what do I do? Or maybe the more advantageous question is, what role do I play? That connection to a true sense of self can help bring an answer to that. So how do you help people, guide them? What do you see that's keeping people from being able to tune into their own compass, and how do we find that?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I really love the way you rephrased it as, what is my role? Because that does put us, this actually speaks to answering your question. So what is my role is a much more in the moment question. We can go abstract about it because we're so good at that. But it tends to want to put something after what is my role? Like, what is my role at Thanksgiving dinner? What is my role in my family? What is my role in my community? Like there tends to be a little, or in this particular, so what is my role in this interaction? And that draws us back to the present moment. And again, I'll never be the person saying like it's all just about just being totally in the present moment.
Yeah.
But it also kind of is. And the more that we're here, I would say, is the more that we are actually responsive to what is needed right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that we're away from that, like the farther out we get, the more challenging it is to respond in the moment. And so, of course, we need some planning, or we look at like what are the big things we want to do, whether they be personal, professional, political, whatever. There are bigger things, and we kind of go like, okay, well, that might need this, or I might need to plan in this way, but there is also something that goes, okay, and things are exactly the way they are right now. So what is the gesture I make like, what is the first step, even to these bigger plans? What is actually the very first thing? So this is a little different than the compass, but there is a piece that I do with people a lot, which is about like, okay, there's something you want to do or create or move towards, or, you have a vision. So what is the very first step? People almost always give me a very first step that either actually has like 3 steps before it or is like a whole thing. Like we'll be like, what's the one tiny thing? And they'll be like, okay, I need like a new morning routine. I'm like, okay, that's like 10 things.
Yeah.
A new morning routine that's not one thing. Or they go, oh, I need to, I don't know, file for a grant. I'm like, okay, that's actually not the first step. The first step might be to find the grant, or like you already have it. Okay, then download that document. That's the first step. So bringing people back to doesn't mean we don't take action. It means we go, what is actually the very first thing, which is that responsive quality, responsive to if I haven't chosen the grant to apply for, then that's the first step. But if I have, then the step is to go to the web, so it changes based on circumstances. If I am applying for school and I get in, my next step is different than if I don't get in. And so having this like, oh, there's the compass is probably more about values and a way of being. So we're orienting like, okay, if this matters to me, I will find a way to do what matters to me, whether things are responding in my favor or not. Whether somebody says yes to a date with me, whether I get pregnant when I want to get pregnant, whether I get the job I want to get, like whether if it's a yes, my response is different than if it's a no. But the kind of the compass tells me that I can always orient to that which matters to me. And I do think it requires more silence, maybe quiet more than silence, but it requires a little bit more quiet than most of us give ourselves most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, you use the phrase, and I've heard it and said it myself, just to even to that idea of feeling into something. So to feel into anything, it's quiet, it's space, it's awareness, it's enough to be able to, would you agree with that? It's that kind of enough stillness to feel into what's true in the response for that moment. Yeah.
I mean, I do think that for most of us, slowing down is really important. Sometimes that can become its own habit. Like everything has to go really slow. And I had this one client who used the phrase moving at the speed of trust.
Oh, that's good.
So I don't know where that came from. I'll just say Sarah Johnstone said it to me, but I love it. And it helped me because it's also like there are times when if I was trusting, I would move faster. If it was at the speed of trust. And there's other times that like the speed of trust is like, oh yeah, I trust enough to slow down. I trust enough to say, if it's for me, it'll be there tomorrow. And then other times that it's like, oh, I trust enough I can take that action. And even if it's wrong, I'll figure it out. Like then there'll be the next move, right? Like,
well, and you talked earlier about the power in surrender and the trust in surrender and the trust in patience and the waiting for whatever, for the next season, for the next step of clarity. But, instead of rushing through because I'm lacking trust, I move at the speed of trust. Oh my gosh, that's so good. So good. Okay. As a woman, to embody your pleasure, live your purpose, and know your power is a revolutionary act. I'm here for the revolution. These are your words, obviously.
Thank you.
You're like, damn, that's good. Who said
Yeah,
that?
look at that.
Like, it's you. You said it.
Yeah.
As a woman, to embody your pleasure, live your purpose, and know your power, it's a revolutionary act, and I'm here for the revolution. Talk to me about what that means.
Well, I do think that this is, there are things that we have said already in our conversation that are connected to this, that I remember kind of the seeds of that came to me, and I was leading an in-person workshop. And it was the kind of both and of, yes, women's embodied pleasure is feared and demonized. Like, let's not pretend like that's not true. However, are we going to deny ourselves the experience of our own pleasure just because somebody might misuse it? They might see it and kind of like get a little gross about it, or like, yes, that kind of gaze. It's not to say that's not real, but and in some way that's our power too, is to know, like, this is too big, too powerful, too pure for you to corrupt. Your gaze doesn't corrupt this. And I refuse to deny myself that experience just because you might see it and take it the wrong way. I mean, again, it's always really important to note there are like actual dangerous circumstances, and there are actually women in the world who are truly, need to be more careful than other women. I would also say most of the women that I'm talking to, most of the time, are mostly a lot safer than we feel. And so that's part of the revolution, is to, not as an obligation. It's not like now you must do this, but it's to go, oh, I am a woman who actually has a fair bit of safety in my life. And so where am I willing to be that possibility model? Where am I willing to, and not just for other women, like, I'm going to change the lives of the men that I refuse to shrink around.
Ugh. So good. So I want to break this down a little bit, if that's okay. So embody your pleasure. Explicitly, are you speaking to sexual pleasure or any pleasure?
Yes, and and again, I will say that, like, I think each woman, I've seen this so much, is like, some women get so focused on sexual pleasure, right? That even the idea of like a self-pleasure practice can only mean orgasm. And then it's really valuable to expand that out and be like, where else is there? Like when you smell that, the trees are starting to bloom, and it's just, and I'm walking down the trail, and there might be a moment of just like, oh my God,
Yeah.
and somebody might see me in that, right? Or hear me go like, oh, what is that smell? Where is this wafting from? Or to like enjoy ice cream or steak, or, whatever it is you enjoy. That. And then some women are so afraid of sexual pleasure that they're kind of like, oh yeah, I get it. It's pleasure in all things. And by that they mean, like, so I don't really have to go into like
The
sexual
sexual pleasure.
like to be seen, or to feel my own body sexually. So yes, and.
Okay. And when we started this conversation, or this piece of the conversation, you said that our pleasure, how did you put it? You didn't say our pleasure is our power, but in essence, yeah, like it's a threat, that it's scary to some people. What do you mean by that? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of things. One is literally just to be in our own bodies in the present moment. I think we that's where we will find our power. And it's also where, when we're really there, we kind of go like, yeah, no, you can't tell me not to do that. We're just like,
Yeah.
we're less governable.
Yeah.
And so that's dangerous. And then there is so much power in sexuality. And
Yeah.
I do think that female sexuality like is not that male sexuality doesn't have a lot of expansion too. And some of this I get a little concerned that it can just be the kind of the new age version of trying to differentiate. Like I think there's probably a lot of expansion that we just haven't tapped into. But it's pretty vast. And I do sometimes just think about I think I saw like I don't know, a quote on social media or something that was like, "Hey, people, like you have to like look around at all the women, like you all came from a woman." Or it was something like, "Here's a fun fact about women. We made all of you." I think that was it. I was like, yeah, and that is connected to sexuality. Now, obviously, not every woman wants to or should like birth children, and that is just fine. But to recognize that biologically this is connected.
The creation power sort of
Yeah,
too,
and that's kind of enormous. And I think that the culture, again, I don't just want to say men or even the patriarchy, like the larger overculture can feel, and that's a mystery too. Like this is mysterious power. This is power that we can't control. And so it is something that then we try to suppress. So as much as we can sort of suppress, box in, codify, shame, as much as we can create kind of boundaries around this, the easier it is to control people.
Yeah, the way I've thought about that, the power in sexuality is just through my own experience in part, but even like I've been down this Mary Magdalene path and this sort of the sacred feminine and what's the connection in all of this, trying to bring some connection to it, but really feeling like we find our power in our body. It is power from within rather than power from without. And so whether it's sexually or otherwise, the ability to tune in and not shame allows me to tune into or access all of the kinds of power beyond the sexual power. So it's a bit of a portal or like a way to one of the ways, I guess. I don't know if you'd agree with any of this, but I'm trying to find words for it. But I feel like in the shaming of sexuality, we've at least in my experience, it's cut us off from the desire to go into our bodies, period, end of story. So then we have a hard time tapping into that inner compass and that intuition because we've disassociated from our bodies and moved up into our heads. And so that I liked the word you used, ungovernable, like that when we get into that wild or ungovernable part of that we're not trying to control either, that it's an untamed version. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's a really important part, like of, and often sort of missed, actually, the way that it can be scary to our own selves. And again, it's kind of the not one or the other. It's like, yes, actually, there are external forces that are trying to control you or are judging you or are potentially harmful. But when we put it all out there, it's like we miss that part where it's, oh yeah, also this is untamed to me.
Yeah.
And that is powerful.
What's the revolution, Kendra?
What is the revolution? I mean, it's all these pieces. Like I think, it's hopefully larger than this, and it is also individual, and then together. I think there's something so powerful about women coming together and being in these ways together. And we didn't speak to purpose as much. I mean, I think they just weave together. But part of what I find tricky is that the conversation around purpose has mostly been talked about for men. And even in the polarity world, and I don't think these are exactly opposing, but they sure seem that way sometimes, is like the question will be like, how does a man want to give his purpose? And how does a woman want to give her love? Again, how we want to give our love, we could just call that purpose. But part of it is that so often, and it is relational. I mean, that's the thing. It does come into the relational. Our purpose can be relational, but I don't think our love is just relational in the human realm, or certainly not just in the romantic sexual realm. I mean, how do I want to give my love like to this whole world in a relational sense? That's purpose. That's what we're talking about.
Yes.
And But a lot of times women get cut off from then the idea that they really have purpose, or get sucked into the idea that like their children are their purpose. And I am personally of the mind that no person can ever be our purpose, not even our children. It's just greater than that.
Is there more on purpose that you want to say that you didn't say yet?
I mean, that's the big part of it. I do, again, I don't see it as much these days. Like, I think there really is a bit of a maturation coming to some of this polarity world. I started the polarity world in like 1999, so I'm kind of like, okay, great, let's just see where we're at now. But I have seen enough people, not even, I mean, I've really seen people suffer for this, where like the idea is that the relationship should be a woman's purpose, that her man is her purpose, or that her home and her family is her purpose. And then I've just seen everybody suffer. Like, she's not happy, he's not happy because somehow she's supposed to be happy because he's working, so the relationship can be her purpose. She supposedly can do whatever she wants, but she's not happy, so why is she not happy? Like, and I'm like, no, we all have deep purpose in the world. And when we pretend like that's not true, I think we're deeply unfulfilled.
This may be getting too far into the weeds. Just stop me if it is. But I was talking to somebody the other day about purpose. I grew up in kind of an evangelical Christian. I don't know if you heard of Rick Warren's Purpose-Driven Life, and I've gotten sort of turned off to that idea that we have a purpose that's only associated to vocation. But then, ironically or not, that I'm the last 5 years I've been like, what's my dharma? It's the same question in essence to me now. Looking back, it's like, what am I uniquely wired, skilled, created to do that intersects with what lights me up and brings me joy, and then serves the whole? Is that how? It's easy to be like, well, what is our purpose? And I think people might instantly go to job or
like, what do I do?
Yeah. So when you say, when you're talking about purpose, what do you mean is the question?
I mean, I definitely mean more like what you're talking about with dharma. I did a little bit, I think I called it the bread and butter of purpose. And I was basically saying like, butter is the dharma, but you can put butter on lots of things. So like butter, like your delivery system could be mashed potatoes, it could be toast, it could be broccoli, it could be rice, like we can put butter, but butter, like essentially like we have a dharma and we can offer that, we can put that on anything. And then but a lot of time the conversation just stops with the delivery system. Like, what is my purpose? So what is my role? What is my job? What am I going to do with this? And again, recognizing that money is important in the culture we live in, but then it also gets attached to like, and can I make money with that? And then it's just so heavy, like the whole,
I know.
we're hanging a lot of coats on that one poor coat rack.
That's been my life the last year. And I finally was like, listen, I'm going to go make money over here.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do my dharma here. And maybe they'll cross at some point and maybe they won't. But I was working so hard to like figure it all out. And I'm like, I just have to live right now and not let it get so heavy. I appreciate that you said that. Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else on your heart or mind that we haven't talked about that would be important to share today?
Gosh, I don't know. It's been such a beautiful conversation. I love the different pieces that you brought in and then where that we got to go with that. And I think this is also a lot,
Yeah, no.
I mean, one of the things I do like to say to people, again, it sort of came from teaching more in person, and then you come to the end and people are like, what am I going to take away? I'm going to take everything, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And I'm going to make sure I have this daily practice and I want to take everything home. And I like to say, practices are best when done daily, but they're even better when you actually do them.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And so for anybody listening, whether it's about this conversation or it's about whatever you're getting lit up by, I generally encourage people like to take one thing. Like, what's the one thing maybe you get 2 if you're like, super high achiever, but really, what's the one thing that you could put into some kind of implementable way in your life? Like, and sometimes that can just be creating more space to like think, meditate, dream, percolate on. Like, if there's one thing that you were like, holy shit, that's amazing, then really stick with that. Like, journal on it, talk about it with other people, make a practice, see if it works, try a different practice, but like, do that one thing.
I love that. The thing that's coming to mind for me from this conversation is moving at the speed of trust. And just what the world that we're living in right now. For me, that's been so forefront. And I don't mean to make this conversation about politics, but I'm really trying to figure out how to navigate and live in the world, like to be connected to what's happening, but that, and with all of life, to move at the speed of trust and to feel that inhale and exhale and not be rigidly moving forward or sitting back on my haunches. Is that the right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so beautiful, right? That to recognize that either one of those can be kind of a habit or
Yeah.
a response. And I just want to say, especially related to the world, that moving at the speed of trust could be different than like just trust that everything will work out.
Yes.
Be like,
Yeah.
trust that my response is valuable, right? Trust that whatever I'm feeling about this actually has wisdom. And so move at the speed of that. And I think that really brings it back to the inhale, exhale you were referencing again, which is that it's not just like, oh, trust the universe or trust the other person or even only trust myself, right? That there actually is this dynamic, I don't know, flow, or there's something dynamic
Co-creation.
in there. Yeah.
Yeah, trusting that. For me, it's really been day to day. It's been, oh gosh, I'll wake up with kind of a journal thing or something I'm going to put in my newsletter on my mind. And I'm like, God, am I really going to say this? Am I really going to put this out here? And in that moment, coming back to center and going, oh, I'm trusting that this is the time now to do this thing, and then the next day feeling like, I really feel like I should do something. Have I done enough? Have I done enough? That what you were speaking about. And then pausing and going, I don't need to do more. I need to move at the speed of trust for what the moment is bringing forward, is maybe the way I'm trying to walk that out right now. Yeah.
I love that. And there may be some almost tangible pieces that come into play. And I really have the sense that even just that awareness in your mind will probably ping in certain moments that'll just shift some. I mean, it sounds like you're
Yeah.
already doing it, and now it's like taking it a little more consciously and being like, oh, now
Yeah.
I do that on purpose.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, I love that.
I wonder if people want to get a hold of you, where can they find you?
Well, I would say the easiest way is my website, and it's just kendracunov.com. I'm Kendra Cunov everywhere, and that's a pretty uncommon name, so you can find me on Instagram, on Facebook, and then my website. And the thing that I thought of while we were talking that might be, the most relevant to some of the things we talked about. I mean, I'll just say on my website, there's a lot of resources. I have a lot of blogs. A lot of them have videos associated with them. Like, have fun. You'll probably be able to tell pretty quickly if I'm for you or if I'm not for you. But if the conversation around pleasure, purpose, and power piqued anyone's interest, I am teaching an in-person 5-day retreat in Northern California in September of 2025. So you can find that on my website, and I am super excited about it. It's a gorgeous retreat center. I love these topics. I love the way that they weave together. I think doing that work in person, together is so valuable. So check it out.
That's exciting. I hope to be there. Kendra, thank you so much for taking your time today and your commitment to the work that you're doing. It's been, how I started this conversation literally a year ago. You are one of the people that when I started the podcast, was like, oh my gosh, if I could have Kendra on my podcast, this would be like, really, this is a dream. And I would have assumed we would have been talking about other things. And the maturation in the space that you've worked in and what's being called out of you or brought forth in society, and just it's just been beautiful to just look at your work and see your evolution, I guess, to what's happening. Is that right? Does that resonate with you in terms of
Yeah,
what?
I mean, and I love your reflection of that. I mean, thank you so much. I'm touched, and I hope that's true. I heard Malcolm Gladwell say in an interview that people will point to something he said and be like, "Well, you've changed," and he was like, "I hope so. I hope that my ideas are evolving."
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's so good. It's beautiful and it's encouraging, and it's been a light to me as an example of how to continue to do the work within and relate to the community and the people around, and evolve. That's what this is. It's about evolution. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, thank you. It's really a
Yeah.
pleasure. It's a
Yeah.
pleasure.